Hi friends, can't believe it's almost 4 years since the first Tamiya basic putty video I uploaded back at the end of 2016. It's still a perfectly good video tutorial for this technique and viewed almost 40,000 times, thanks a bunch! I've linked it in the top right corner if you'd like to recap it before my version 2 here. In this updated tutorial, I will show you some additional possible steps to allow for more variance in the texture applied to your surface for you to also choose from for other Maschinen Krieger models or even the Space Mark 44 versions which I feel benefit from a less aggressive texture application. This tutorial is of course useful for other kinds of models, but it really shines when applied for the Mark 44 series. They are especially suited to and look great with heavy texture. The next version I'm building is an Axe Knight, so it's still a Mark 44, and I've decided to once again give my model the finger with Tamiya basic putty, but this time with protection, a nitrile glove. Makes me nostalgic for airports too. Please don't use latex gloves, you may experience a bad reaction with lacquer-based products and paints. The finger method is perfect for very heavy texture and can create the potential for more happy accidents as the repetitive motion will sometimes lift out small divots of putty and helps with an extremely varied and interesting surface. I honestly have mixed thoughts on using a glove though. It's certainly safer and cleanup is super easy, but naturally there is less feel and control. The glove will pull back with the putty and it will be more challenging to judge. I do use the glove more often than not now, as I will often be taking photos after and need my hands to be clean. I'll let this roll in real time as much as possible for you because I feel that the speed and the cadence with which I work to produce this finish is important. It's a fast drying product. I mean, it's solvent based, it is lacquer based, so make sure you have adequate ventilation and you need to move relatively quickly and move at such a pace that it dries at the right time as you reapply your finger so that it pulls back a little bit, and that's what creates that faux cast texture. And you can see some very interesting divots lift up and various, very interesting looking surface details are being created here. On this particular application, this time, I am going to be more careful around these small details. I wanted to go extremely heavy on the first Mark 44, the Ammonite version that you've seen. This one you can see that I'm careful. I'm applying the heaviest details around the areas between the details because that's one of the focal points that will look between the details when there appears to be nothing, and this texture is giving us that detail. And then for the next step, I'll be coming back and applying a slightly finer, more careful, more controlled and measured application around those other details. Here is also, I'm preparing actually for the next steps and cleaning my glove off at the same time. I'm all about the less but better and economy of effort here. Scraping the glove against it's a milk bottle lid here, helps me to create a flatter surface on the tool part of the glove here on my finger, which I feel allows for a slightly more precise application of the putty. And here you can see that there's a number of those B1. You guys, when you make the kit, you'll be looking at all those B1s and cutting them off. Applying the putty around those details and allowing a little bit of space for the medium step of putty to come in next. But that's looking very spiffy indeed. I'm liking it a lot. Don't hesitate to take little breaks. Hold it in your hands, kind of step back for a moment, spin it around, and look at how look at it and see how you feel about what you've done. And of course, take the time to enjoy it as well. I mean, that's what I'm doing here. I'm looking at it up close and thinking, hey, that looks pretty cool. The next step down in the texture intensity scale for me is to add some extra thin glue to the Tamiya basic putty to make a kind of slurry of the putty that's still thicker than, say, something like Mr. Surface of 500. It's very simple to do. Even the first time you do it, you'll be surprised how pro you feel. I'm using a AK Interactive size 2 brush here, and I'm also using some of their new cement, the extra thin in the orange cap, to do it. And dip it in, and away we go. It's pretty easy to judge. As you put your first kind of stabs in with the brush, wet with the glue, you can see that it softens and thins it quite quickly. If you're getting to the stage where it's starting to feel about the texture of a paint or a Mr. Surfacer, then we may as well switch to that technique instead. This looks about right to me. Let's call it roughly a 50-50 mix with a consistency, say, halfway between Tamiya Basic Putty and Mr. Surfacer 500. This is perfect for what we want here, which is an interim step between the harshest effects on the easier to reach surfaces of the Mark 44 main hull and the detail spaces in between, where we still want some texture. In addition, the cool thing about using the glue is it then reactivates the first step heavy texture, allows it to be reworked slightly and then blended in with the new texture. Cool, right? Please remember to have fun and enjoy this. We can't really get it wrong, and even if we feel it's been totally ruined, the effects can be sanded back or even completely off. So let's relax and get stuck in. Here's an area where this technique shines compared with the finger, smaller details. Yes, we are working with a relatively large scale of 1 in 20, which feels huge compared with our tank buddies working in 135, so we can take a little more care here to preserve the wonderful detail areas of the kit. You'll also notice that I have a little more glue mixed in here, and it's a smoother mix than before, so as to make sure it blends with the first stage and does not obscure detail as it dries. Last thing, I like to do a series of very quick rounds to try and pick up any wet spots to create more randomized armor patterns in the texture. We can think of this as a kind of pre-weathering plus battle damage simulation, which we can then pick out during our paint steps. We might even be able to make some happy little trees in here and maybe even give them a friend or two. Yeah, I said it. Oh, and one more bonus tip to keep in mind is that although you may see me work very quickly, you don't need to do this in a hurry at all. It's fine for a start-stop work approach, and you can always set it down, take a break, and come back with fresh eyes, and add more like I'm doing here. The power of coffee cannot be underestimated in my workshop. Alrighty, now the next level down of texture is to go straight in with the Tamiya Basic Putty plus thin glue mix here. Please let me step back just for a moment to share the theme of this armor on this version of the Mark 44. My first one here has the finger, heavy texture all over. As it's the first version of the Mark 44, named the Ammonite, I wanted to show it in the roughest and perhaps we could call it the most primitive iteration of its armor. Now with this one, an Axe Knight, I want to show a slight refinement with lighter grades of armor, depicted with less rough textures in places where the Ammonites had not been knocked out in battle. Yes, I am taking inspiration from real-world tanks here, so heaviest armor on the front hull and components, and then lighter armor on the rear, and then lightest, of course, on the roof. I do confess to thinking about these a little bit too much, but please forgive me, I'm just super into it, and this is also part of my own personal enjoyment. Comparing them like this, and you can see that it's actually quite a difference in texture, as well as apparent weight and depth of the faux armor. Okay, let's go down to the smoothest of textures that I think will suit the Mark 44, stippling Mr. Surfacer 500. Now with all your experience of the finger and the glue, you will find this step fast, easy, and very satisfying. It's the shake and bake of adding armor texture. I mean, it's fully endorsed by Ricky Bobby in Talladega Nights. I'm sure I saw it in one of the cutscenes. If you are zooming through the steps like I am here and planning to reuse the same brush, which is fine, one tip is to use a little acrylic lacquer paint thinner to soften your brushes as it's likely hardened up. But rest assured it will be usable again easily and you'll be back in business. The thinner I have here is Guyanote T06, just in case you're interested, but it can be anything generic. But I wouldn't go so far as to use a tool cleaner as it can soften the glue holding the bristles in place, and you don't want to be stippling them into the model. Maybe instead of shake and bake, it's dip and stab repeatedly, but that did not test well with our focus groups. So let's call it stipple. Well, stippling basically means that, if I have to really dumb it down, means stab the surface repeatedly, but of course not through, just the surface. One pass will put down a bond coat that will etch into the plastic. That means it's a kind of chemical attachment instead of just sitting on the surface. Then a subsequent round to fill out the texture usually works. We can go for a third round if we really want to, but that's more than enough to achieve the right look and effect. And that's how it looks at the end. I'm most satisfied and happy about this. So, what did you learn, Uncle Linc? Well, first is that we can easily vary the textures over our models to help sell the narrative. In this case, of course, it was the different thicknesses of armor. Second, and probably biggest for me, was that we really can hand paint a scale model with water-based acrylics, right from the start all the way to the finish. And probably the third lesson for me was this project, it gave me a couple of points to practice. And this one is really key, right? The knowing when to stop or back off from going too hard, as it easily could have gone off the rails here. That's an important one for me, and I hear it from many of my friends too, the knowing when to back off. This one, because I was way out there in experimental land, I had to call it, and I'm pretty happy I stopped short. That was a Frank Costanza move of me there, stopping short. Between us, it's been a really long time since I made this kind of video, 3 years maybe, and I'm wondering if you like it. I've been a little busy, and I've been spread out amongst too many things. So I sat down on the weekend to work on this for you, and I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know in the comments what you think. If you did like it, please hit the like button and consider subscribing, because I'll be sharing lots more videos like this in the future. I quite like making it myself, and I feel like I'm giving back more to our community. Speaking of the community, I'd like to take this chance to thank our amazing Patreon supporter folks who make these videos happen. You can see the names on the screen here, and just best people ever. And of course, those of you who want to join, then become the best people ever. No, I'm kidding. But they make this happen, and the perks I try to bribe them and you with the early releases of ad-free videos, high-res fancy studio shots like this, and we've got a rip-roaring Discord chat channel, which is super fun. Myself and the other awesome modelers in there answer the questions, give feedback, color ideas, various stuff. We have little group builds, and we chat about really crazy stuff too. I mean, sometimes we even talk about plastic models and robots and stuff. Thanks always, folks. More soon. Hope you really like it. Bye for now.